The Misfits. The people with opinions and the stories behind them. Argue with them. Disagree with them. If you're brave enough, listen to them. The people who think differently don't just shape conversations. They disrupt them. Because the misfits aren't rare. They're among us. Today's guest operates inside a system most people only see from the outside. Steve Woodrow is both a lawyer and a member of the Colorado House of Representatives, someone working at the intersection of law, policy, and power. But inside that system comes with its own realities, one that you don't always match what people believe from the outside. Today, we're talking with him how that system actually works, what people misunderstand about that system, and what it means to try and really be a part of change. Steve, welcome to Misfits Among Us, bud.
Joey, thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So let's just jump right into it because I think later in life, stuff gets super interesting. And early in life, though it's interesting, it's probably less interesting for everybody else, but I do think it's interesting. Tell us where you grew up. Tell us what built the foundation around who you are today.
I'm from a small town called West Bloomfield, Michigan. It's a suburb of Detroit. I got into politics very young. My earliest political memory, it was 1984. I was being brought into the voting booth by my parents to pull the lever for Walter Mondale. And not only did I know that I was voting in a presidential election, I knew that we were probably the only family voting for Walter Mondale against Ronald Reagan. We grew up, I don't know if you remember the 80s this well, but Ronald Reagan was like a king, and my family really did not have a favorable opinion of him. He was anti-union. He was exploding the debt and deficit. There was the Iran-Contra affair. And in my household, he was pretty much a pariah. And so my first experience and brush with politics was that there are powerful interests in this country. And then there are people who fight for the little guy. I'm about 5'6" on a good day. And so, just always sort of identified with that bent. Went to the University of Michigan, studied political science, then lived in Chicago for about 9 years, where I went to law school, practiced law for a bit, and then moved out to Colorado with my family in 2011. And I've been out here ever since.
This was a much more liberal time when people lived in Michigan and Chicago. Colorado's more liberal. So did all of this kind of bring your views through to kind of where you are today? Or was this just a happenstance? And did you kind of end up going in a lot of different directions from just up to your political standpoint?
I've been pretty politically consistent, I would say. Look, I'm a lefty, but nowadays I'm probably considered a moderate. I think the left has gotten more left and the right has gotten more right. And I have now found myself where I used to be considered a pretty solid progressive, probably more left of center. Maybe that just comes with aging. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I've been in the state house, seeing how things run. I've always had this idea that government isn't perfect, but it does serve as a check on exceptionally powerful corporations. My stepdad got laid off from the Upjohn Company, if you remember Upjohn Pharmaceuticals in Michigan back in the day. He had worked there 20 years, and I watched them, summarily cast him aside when new management came in and new ownership took over. And I just saw sort of up close firsthand how quickly corporate America can just sort of jettison you. There's really no loyalty there. It's about the bottom line. And then I always just saw basically the Democratic Party fighting more for workers and workers' rights and civil rights, even though the Republican Party has a storied tradition. I think that they sort of moved away from that starting in about 1980, at least, in our lifetime. And so I've always had this sort of political bent. I've always wanted to get involved. As a lawyer, I do class actions, which means I sue powerful corporations, banks, financial institutions, telemarketers, debt collectors, really large corporate landlords. It's always sort of this David versus Goliath mindset. And my political leanings have always sort of just dovetailed with what I've wanted to do professionally.
With everything that you've seen politically over the last number of years, because I think it's been, no matter where you sit, it's been much more polarizing than it's been historically. What you're doing in law, before we talk about what you're doing in politics, what you're doing in law, has that been more complicated? Is this a harder fight on a daily basis, which might make it a little bit more exciting?
Yeah, so really good questions. It's definitely not pointless. It's quite the opposite. More that the legislative branch and the executive branch have sort of gone, off the deep end, one with paralysis, but then the things that they do pass really don't help people. I think that the courts and the legal system takes on even more of an outsized role in terms of how impactful you can be. But there is a flip side to that. It has gotten a lot harder the past 10, 15 years. And that's mostly due to the Supreme Court. Folks really don't seem to have the full picture that when you elect conservative justices, they not only roll back things like abortion protections and are very hardliners on immigration, they also are pretty anti-consumer. And so you get in a situation where decision after decision from the highest court leans towards corporate America and away from consumer protections. And that has made the class action practice a lot more difficult. You see a lot more things getting sent to arbitration. You see a lot more sort of jury verdicts even getting reversed by appellate courts and the highest court. And that has made things tougher. But that doesn't mean we stop the work. That just means we have to be more creative and strategic. So I started practicing in Chicago in 2005 and always have done consumer protection work, class action practice. And when I came out here to Colorado in 2011, opened up a branch of the firm office, just sort of doing the same thing here. And yeah, it dovetails with my legislative work. There's space or a lane for people in office who want to fight for everyday people against large, powerful corporate interests. And so whether I'm suing someone in a courtroom or trying to pass legislation to protect consumers, protect workers' rights, those two things go hand in hand with each other. I have to be careful. Obviously, I can never vote on anything or run anything that benefits me personally in a particularly any given case. But the two, let's call them practice areas, overlap almost completely. In terms of my time, I basically have had two full-time jobs for the last 6 years. And that's one of the reasons I'm finding myself needing to step away from the legislature. State legislators in Colorado, like many states, we do not make a living. They really want a citizen-led legislature. What it actually does is it means that people who are retired or independently wealthy or can afford to be in the legislature stick around the longest. The rest of us have to support our families and work two jobs until we burn out.
Do you think the legislature was a natural progression for you? Like when you were in Chicago and when you were in Michigan, were you like, one day this is something I want to do? Or was there something that happened when you were in Colorado and you were like, I gotta fucking join this cool crew of folks to make some change?
I'd always had it in the back of my mind that I might run for office one day. I didn't know what that would exactly look like. Most of what I was focused on was the sort of federal level, Congress, and what's happening there. And then I started poking around at 16. I'd been having a lot of success as an attorney, had some extra time and resources, and I started getting really involved with the Democratic Party. And then I realized that there are all these people who I had no idea were out there working super hard. And I mean, we're talking about just everyday people working with families. And we're also talking about a lot of retired professionals. So retired lawyers and judges and doctors and nurses and administrators. So the way we have it out here is we're broken up into house districts. I'm in House District 2. And I started going to the monthly meetings and I was just blown away that there was this whole apparatus of folks working on the issues I cared about, fighting back, on all levels. And I started realizing yeah, the federal level, that gets all the press and the attention. I mean, most people know Colorado for either Joe Neguse or Lauren Boebert, but where the real policy gets made is on the state and city level. Denver City Council has a tremendous impact on the day-to-day lives of people in Denver. The Colorado State Legislature has a tremendous impact on the day-to-day lives of people in Colorado. The federal government, aside from immigration policy, which obviously impacts people, and federal tax policy, they don't have as much of a say, especially now with the gridlock in Congress. They basically pass one bill a year through reconciliation in that process. And it's usually a mess. It's a hodgepodge of wish list items and crony capitalism and whatever gets thrown into the big bad or big beautiful bill, depending on what side you're on. But we pass, the Colorado legislature, we pass something like 400, 500 bills a year. And those bills impact people in a very real sense.
Is this where people should spend their time? Like if you're looking at the younger generation now and either they're in school, maybe they're not in school, maybe recently laid off, it's happening all over the place. If they need to spend their time somewhere, should they just go to their local, I don't know, meetings, local town meetings, whatever those might be, and just figure out how to get involved? And do you think that's gonna, I don't know if it's gonna fulfill them, but do you think there's gonna be something that they're gonna say, wait a second, this is something that I'm drawn to that I might not have known historically just by virtue of always working for the man up until this point in time?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress this enough. If you want to make impactful change and have any influence, start showing up. Show up to local government meetings, show up to the state capitol, but also figure out which of the major parties your values align more closely with and start going to those meetings. Don't be so cynical that you just chalk it all up to, well, nothing ever gets done. That's what powerful people want you to think. They don't want you to actually be involved. They don't want you to actually have a voice. So show up and start talking, and most of all, start listening. One of the things I did, I came in sort of, I'm a lawyer, I'm really successful, I'm a class action attorney, and I've taken on powerful banks, etc. And I go to these monthly meetings. I started showing up, and I was just blown away. There's people who had been judges sitting on the bench for 3 decades. There's doctors and surgeons and retirees who have this unbelievable wealth of institutional knowledge. And it just took me putting ego aside and listening and hearing them out and listening to them, say, here's why we do these things. Here's what we've tried to do in the past. Here's who stopped it, why it wasn't able to get done. And here's what we're fighting for. And it was pretty incredible. I started getting involved. We had a split legislature when I first started showing up. The Colorado State House was Democrat. The Colorado Senate was Republican. And so our representatives would come talk to us and say, hey, I just passed this really great piece of legislation out of the House. It's going to go die in the Senate. Or they'd say the Senate just passed this really awful thing, right? Anti-LGBTQ rights, anti-immigrant, just really nasty stuff. We're going to kill it in the House. And what it took was us as a group coming together and being strategic, saying, how can we flip the Senate? How can we expand our House majority? How can we ensure that the governor, AG, Secretary of State, State Treasurer, all share our values? So we don't have these conversations where we try to make progress and we just get sort of stonewalled in one chamber or the other. And, that's exactly what we did. We flipped the state Senate. Then the next time around, we increased our majorities. Sort of, Colorado has been this shiny blue pearl, so to speak, in the middle of several different red waves. And that's what keeps us going is it's the organizing, and it's not always the most glamorous work. It's calling your neighbors, it's text message, it's door knocking, it's writing postcards, it's letting people know that you're out there and you care. Because I can tell you that the people who don't agree with you are out there working their tails off to get their folks elected. And I feel like the people who I see eye to eye with the most, we sort of slept on things for a number of years, especially at the federal level where, people would say, well, both sides are the same. Yes, I don't like necessarily the Republican Party, but whatever, my Republican senator is just fine and dandy. And then what you find out is who controls the Senate controls the Supreme Court. And then you end up having certain folks appointed who take away Roe v. Wade and curl back other rights. And you get decisions like Citizens United. A lot of these were 5-4 decisions that would have gone the other way had the Senate looked differently. And so I tell people all the time, get involved, show up, don't be so cynical. Like, we are government of, by, and for the people. And when you sit out, when you sit on the sidelines, someone else is showing up. And they're going to have government that looks like, what it does today. Something that's the byproduct of a lot of apathy, a lot of cynicism, a lot of folks tuning out and turning off when they should be dialed in. Because America, in the truest sense of the word, is an experiment, right? Ben Franklin was asked when the Constitutional Convention came together, what kind of government do you have? And he famously replied, a republic if you can keep it. Right? This isn't a thing that's guaranteed. The government is up for renewal basically every other year and in a big way every 4 years. And if you don't show up and you're not active, someone else is. And you're going to get their government that they want, that they control, that favors them and the policies that they're looking for. And that's why we have government that basically turns a blind eye to pollution, cuts taxes for the wealthy, and passes a bunch of other things that I think most people, if you asked them on the street, do you agree with this stuff? They'd say, oh, hell no. And it's like, okay, if you don't agree with it, you've got to show up. America's hard. It takes work to keep this experiment going. And who knows how long we're going to have it. But it depends on all of us actually showing up to sort of keep the project moving forward.
You and I are both products of seeing this growth and explosion of technology. This stuff didn't exist when we were kids. With the way technology is going now, is it making it more complicated for us to, or even for you to kind of see what needs to happen or talk to folks. I don't like getting the text messages that say, "Hey, Jim, I'm down here presenting blah, blah, blah. We'd love to give you," I'm like, "I don't know what the fuck this thing is. Stop. I don't want the text message anymore." And politics are always this thing where, yes, they're important when something about it bothers you. But when you don't really care so much, it's out of sight, out of mind. And what you're saying is it should never really be out of sight, out of mind. It should be on the forefront of your mind. The people that focused on political science in college, I think, made the right decision. But for the rest of us, this was maybe a credit that we needed, that we wanted to quickly get through, and we didn't care enough. And now with the onslaught of technology, it's making it even more complicated. What does this look like from your standpoint from Colorado? But then what do you have in terms of advice or thoughts that's applicable to the rest of the United States?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think the principle itself is almost millennia old. It's the idea that the penalty for disinterest in politics is to be ruled by evil men. The more disinterested you are, the worse it's going to be. You got to stay dialed in and remember that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Rights that, people fought for over decades can be evaporated and scaled back in an instant. Roe v. Wade is gone. The Voting Rights Act has been gutted.
What's that like for Colorado, by the way? When that happened, what was it like for Colorado?
In terms of Roe, we became sort of a sanctuary state where people come knowing that the decision, which is usually an awfully difficult decision for someone to make, is between them and their doctor. The government stays out, which I think is a very good thing. A lot of times we get sort of labeled as being extremist. There's a lot of misinformation about what happens in Colorado. We are a state where a woman has the right to choose. It is in statute. We've put it to the voters to put in the Constitution. It is a place where people can feel safe making that decision. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done on that front. In
Do you
terms
feel
of,
it will always be that way with
no,
things that can change on a dime? Do you feel at any given time, that theoretically Colorado could lose that? And that would obviously, I like the option, right? I believe it's up to women. It's their body. They should decide. I agree. Government and truthfully, men should stay out of women's bodies. Are you worried that one day Colorado might flip?
yeah, look, anything can flip. That's the sort of the point.
No
We're up for
safety,
renewal.
I think is what you're saying. There's no safety here. It's at the time, this is the way things are. And maybe one of the reasons why more people should be in politics is because change is something that does happen. Whether you and I agree with that change or don't, that's the purpose of politics. And right now, I believe we're lucky enough to have Colorado being the way that Colorado is, but that could be different tomorrow.
What gives me hope that it won't change? People being involved, people who care enough to say, this is something that matters, not to be so cynical as to throw your hands in the air and pretend, take the easy way out of both sides are the same. They're both a turd sandwich and a giant douche. And therefore I don't have to show up because it makes no difference. While that sounds nice in a South Park episode or on a bumper sticker, the reality is it's not true. All right. There are key differences, fundamental differences in America between what we would call the two sides. And that doesn't mean that one side is always right and one side is always wrong and that there isn't a lot of gray area in the middle. But there are some things that we fundamentally disagree about. And if you don't show up and if you don't care and you're not there to actually make your case and keep it going, the other side will show up and they will do the work and they will eventually get things to bend their way. So the best defense is for people to stay active and involved and to understand that if they don't, they will change and not for the way you want them to.
Have we gotten lucky, do you think, in America for the last number of years? Roe versus Wade existed for a while. We've seen this much bigger push towards red, and red is making a lot of decisions. And blue is kind of sleeping at the wheel these days. And there just isn't this excitement. But is it just because of the disinterest? Do we think maybe in this next election, hopefully, there'll be more? There was so much interest, if you remember back in the day, when Clinton went on MTV, played the saxophone, and, rock the vote was like a big thing and everybody signed up and everybody started voting. But ever since then, I feel we haven't had as many people showing up to the plate. And instead, people are just sitting there and they're bitching on the sidelines. Like America's bitching on the sidelines.
Yeah, well, America's bitching on the internet. It's making it a lot more difficult to get the truth out there. Steve Bannon has a famous strategy. It's called flooding the zone with shit. You just put so much crap out there, misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, a little bit of truth sprinkled in, and people can't figure it out. right?
Too much noise.
1984, too much noise. 1984, if you remember, the guy Winston, he has this whole job at the Ministry of Truth where he has to go back and change prior things that were said in the past in order to make the present look like it always should have, right? We'll go back and change the projection to make it seem like we got it right. And it rests on this presumption that people can figure out the truth. And so if you take that away from them, they'll be so confused. And Steve Bannon sort of turns that on his head. He's like, you don't have to change the past. You just have to put so much information out there that people can't sift through the difference. They can't tell which way is up or which way is down. And you end up with someone, like Joe Rogan, who gets to sit out there and I'm just asking questions. That's wild, huh? Saying bullshit. And then you sort of like at a restaurant, you sort of get to choose the media that you want to ingest. And so it's mostly confirmation bias. People don't want to listen all day to things that they disagree with. So they find the folks who tell them the things that they want to hear and they pay attention to that. And some of these messages coming out are pretty intoxicating. Look, you can either accept that climate change is real, more guns means more gun violence, that cutting taxes for the rich doesn't spark economic activity, that offshoring jobs to third world nations hurts the American worker, that being anti union hurts wages. You can either accept all of these hard things and try to fix them, or you can just listen to the person who says, fuck that. Climate change is a hoax. Guns keep us safe. Corporations need more money because it'll all trickle down and they create jobs. It's a lot easier, I think, for people to just sort of get their own biases confirmed than actually listen and engage and do the hard work and try to figure out these complicated issues. In terms of excitement, I think Barack Obama was very exciting. I think Bill Clinton, there's been a lot of historical revisionism there, but he was very charismatic and exciting. I think where the left goes wrong is it is super critical of the left. Barack Obama did some amazingly progressive things, especially for the amount of opposition that he faced. People are like, well, you could talk to a leftist. He should have done Medicare for all. And it's like, well, if you were there at the time, he couldn't even get a public option through the Senate, let alone Medicare for all. The ACA was him extending an olive branch, reaching across the aisle, taking a Republican idea that was usually, originally called Romney Care and trying to implement that and coming up with 0 Republican votes. So maybe the lesson there should have been, he should have been a little less conciliatory, but people forget Mitch McConnell and the rest of them said, we're going to make this man a one-term president. And yet he was able to do Lilly Ledbetter fair pay. He was able to get the ACA done. The American Rescue and Recovery Act pulled us out of what by all measures was going to be the second Great Depression and had something like 72 consecutive months of private sector job growth. And yet today, the typical leftist will sit there and bemoan, oh, Barack Obama, he was a centrist. He didn't get enough done. And the things that they say about Bill Clinton, the typical leftist today will act like he was some sort of pariah, even though I remember the 90s when we were actually having boon times. And that was followed up. People forget, sort of gloss over 8 years of W, which were terrible. Basically, a mini recession after that, followed by a full-blown economic meltdown in '08. You had the invasion of Iraq, and based on lies, getting us into war for basically 20 years. And whereas the right is sort of willing to just say, to hell with it, we still support our guys and we want to play the long game, the left eats its own. There's no one pure enough. And so I think that's where part of the issue is in terms of excitement. Right now, there's a lot of excitement around Mayor Mondani in New York, which I think is really cool. There's also a lot of consternation and pushback. And I think that's part of the issue with the left is that, or at least the Democratic Party today, you'll hear that like public opinion of the Democrats is very low. But if you ask people, about half of those folks will tell you that they think that the Democrats are way too progressive, socialists. They're crazy, pie in the sky, campus liberals, pro Hamas, they're terrible. And the other half will say they're way too moderate, way too willing to be corporatists like Republicans. They're Republican light. They're way too pro-Israel. They're a bunch of Zionists. They crap on people actually trying to do anything. They always find the magic number of votes to fail at presenting a good opposition. And it's like, well, both those groups war with each other. The Republicans are eating our lunch. And
Right.
Donald Trump is looting the treasury. And, you see a bunch of people who just spent the past 4 years or so, bragging about how Trump in his first term started no new wars, cheering on a war with Iran. You see them talking about inflation for 4 years under Biden. They no longer care that inflation is up under Trump. The idea that Republicans would be for trade wars and tariffs is lunacy to someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s. And yet here you have them fully enthralled to this man. And I think the reason is, if we're going to peel back, the layers of it, he tells them the one thing that they want to hear so badly, Joey. He tells them with a straight face, it's not your fault. These liberals, they blame you for everything. They blame you for pollution and climate change. They blame that the guns that keep you safe, they say shoot school children. They believe that people should get welfare handouts. All these things that the left believes, they're wrong and you're right. And I'm going to kick the shit out of them and drive them nuts every day because I don't like how they treated you. You've been mistreated and I'm here to punish them for you on your behalf. You've done nothing wrong. You're good people. And that's literally the message that Trump had to come out with on January 6th to get the rioters to go home. It took several hours of his aides saying, go on TV. You have to make a message. You have to get these people to calm down. And the message that actually calmed them down, what did he say? He said, you are loved. You're good people. You are loved. It's enough. Go home. And that's what they need to hear. It reminds me of the movie Good Will Hunting, right? Where like the seminal scene is with Robin Williams talking to Matt Damon, where he says, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And he's like, yeah, John, don't do this to me, John, anyone but you. No, it's not your fault, Will. You don't understand. And that's what I think conservatives and the Republican Party want to hear so badly, right? Because they know deep down that their tax cuts for the rich, their pro-corporatist policies, they've been anti-worker, they've been pro-pollution, they want to drill, baby, drill. They've had these policies that have really hurt everyday people. They've had no healthcare plan, none. All they did was attack the Affordable Care Act for years, call it Obamacare, try to get rid of it in the courts, try to get rid of it when John McCain was still alive, but he stopped them. They've had policy after policy that has been bad for the country. They can either take accountability for that, which is very difficult, or they can go with the guy who gets on TV every day and says, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You're good people. You're loved. These jerks who blame you for everything, it's their fault. And I rile them up better than anyone. People pine for absolution. They want to be told that they shouldn't feel shame. They shouldn't feel guilt. They're not racist. They're not bigoted. It's these crazy Antifa leftists. They're the problem. And that's an intoxicating message because you can either take accountability, which is really hard. It's really hard to admit. If you've been pro-gun your whole life, right? We're in our 40s now, man. If you spent 3 or 4 decades denying that guns equate to gun violence, to have the thing switch in your head and say, well, wait a second, have we gone too far? That's a really tough thing for any brain.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you do that? How do you all of a sudden say, I'm wrong about this? It's a lot easier to just go with the people who tell you you're not wrong. In fact, the people telling you you're wrong are the ones who are wrong. You're right, and I'm going to kick the ever-loving shit out of them. And I think that's one of the reasons why you see such denialism about like Trump and the Epstein files. It's really hard to admit that you've supported someone, who a jury found liable for sexually abusing a woman and then defaming her, who paid a porn star with campaign funds and lied about it, who boasted about grabbing women by the genitalia. You can either admit that you've done that and he's showed up in the Epstein files, over 20,000, 30,000 times?
How much proof do people need? You're in a place right now where you're like, I gotta step back from doing politics for a little bit. This has got to be the hardest time to sit there and say, wait a second, I'm gonna step back from politics, knowing how fucking insane politics are right now. It's maybe is it not as fun anymore? I mean, this just seems like this is like a death race at times, right? Like,
So politics is still fun. I've loved it. It's been an honor and a privilege to represent House District 2. They're great people. I'm stepping away mostly because I can't work 2 full-time jobs,
Sure.
support a family, and make it happen. It is hard to step away. I think, though, to your earlier question, like what amount of proof do people need? For his supporters, there's no amount of proof. And that's my point, is that his message of it's not your fault overrides any amount of proof, mountains of evidence that you could show them that he's committed sexual assault, that climate change exists, that guns cause gun violence, that tax cuts for the rich don't pay for themselves. Doesn't matter the amount of proof that you provide, because for them to change their minds on these things would require a sort of Herculean exercise in mental gymnastics to say, whoa, I've been wrong and I've supported an evil person. And what does it say about me as a person if I've supported
Sure.
an evil person? It's incumbent upon the rest of us who haven't been brainwashed, who don't sort of buy into all the bullshit. One, to stay organized and stay focused and not get so cynical that we tune out. Two, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or however the saying goes, because we seem to hold ourselves to this standard where even for lefties like AOC and Bernie Sanders aren't pure enough anymore. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, what do you all expect? Like you're
Right.
not going to agree with someone 100% of the time. You have to sort of understand that in a two-party system, the lesser evil can be way less evil and it's impacting your life.
Do you think that is the mistake the two-party system now? Like, are we at a place now in America where other countries have many parties and they do things a little bit different in terms of how people get voted in and what that looks like?
Other countries had the advantage of starting their democracies later. So
Mhm.
they were able to look at America and see what's working and what's not working. What do we want to do different? And parliamentary systems have their advantages, but they also have disadvantages, forming coalition governments. Israel has a parliamentary system, and Netanyahu's been in there forever.
Mhm.
So it definitely has its own shortcomings. But think where I come at it is that we have the system we have right now, right? Maybe in years or some cataclysmic event shakes things up so much that it shakes us out of a two-party system. But we have a two-party system right now, and those parties are actually very different. And I know that it's sort of in vogue, and it has been for decades, to sort of just say both sides are the same. But I really take issue with that narrative because the only people it serves are Trump and his cronies. Right? They laugh every time they hear a lefty say both sides are the same. If both sides were the same, then people wouldn't spend hundreds of millions of dollars on elections trying to get certain people elected and not others. That would be a waste of money. But it's not a waste of money because the two sides are actually very different. Under democratic regimes, democratic governments, you get higher taxes on the wealthy, you get more social benefits, you actually get fewer military engagements, you get serious discussions about climate and what we need to do there. You get gun violence prevention legislation. You get all these things in an incrementalist way because it's a two-party system and you got to get enough votes to get things through, right? Whereas on the other hand, when you have Republicans in charge, you get tax cuts for the wealthy, you get explosive spending, even though they claim to curb back spending, you get a lot of offshoring and a lot of corporatism. From that standpoint, the thing that I think hurts us the most as a country that we have to move away from is this idea that both sides are the same because it's such a cop out. It's a lot easier, especially, it's a lot less mentally taxing and a brain drain to just say, both sides are the same. I don't need to pay attention. As someone who's been in a legislature for 6 years, watching bills get passed and debated, the two sides are oftentimes diametrically opposed to one another. And it's those moments that it's crucial. If we had a Democratic Senate for the past however many decades, Roe v. Wade would still be here. Citizens United wouldn't have happened. Bush v. Gore
Mhm.
wouldn't have happened. These are key decisions that have impacted the country that would have gone another way. But, it's easier to, just do the whole turd sandwich, giant douche narrative. It's a shortcut. It's a lot easier. And it's also fed by the fact that, look, sometimes Democrats, we do too much, I think, in terms of reaching across the aisle. It's like this trap that we're stuck in. The press will say that, we're being partisan and we're, not listening. We're not reaching across enough. We're not trying to understand enough. And then we say, okay, let's do bipartisan immigration reform. Let's do bipartisan action on climate. Let's reach across the aisle. And then, 5, 10 years down the road, the press says, well, both sides got us here. Neither solved the problem. It's like, well, we didn't solve the problem because you told us to compromise. The ACA, even though it didn't get any Republican votes, was a compromise, right? Democrats came out right at the start, even though a public option passed the House. Obama's first thing in the Senate was take it out as a show of good faith to Republican senators to see if we can get them on board. And then it's, well, neither side fixed healthcare. The ACA is a mess. Yet you and I both remember a time when pre-existing conditions weren't covered, when you couldn't stay on your parents' insurance until you were 26, when there wasn't a medical loss ratio. Progress is made. And so I think it's a real sort of conundrum that we find ourselves in, because as the people who believe in the power of government to do good, big things, we have the burden. The other side can simply gum up the works. They're running on a platform of government isn't the answer. Government's evil. The most, scariest sentence in the English language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And so all they have to do is get elected, do a shitty job, and then say, look, told you government sucked. And most people are like, yeah, government sucks. And that's a problem. The burden's on us.
What are you worried about with everything going on right now in America? Because there's a lot. The AI explosion, all the layoffs that are going on. I was on LinkedIn and a girl posted and she said, I'm in tears. I'll do anything. I have a daughter. I can't afford anything. I don't have enough of a savings. I don't know what to do. I'll do anything. And my heart breaks. We have a lot of people without work. We're getting to a place that's going to be more complicated. And on one hand, he could sit there and say, it's not going to be my fucking problem, because it might not be, right? And on the other hand, whoever comes in, everyone's going to bitch at that individual for not fixing what's going on. If you were like, I'm the president today, if you wanted that role, it's the worst role,
The worst.
right? Worst role.
Yeah.
But if that was you today, what would you do?
Yeah. So we have to put the noise aside and we have to do things that actually help people. We have to pass some type of universal health care. Everyone needs to be covered. You can't be worried that you're going to get sick, or you have to stay in a job you don't like, or that you are in desperate need of a job because you need health insurance. Heaven forbid your family gets sick. And when the other side says it's going to cost too much, we have to ignore that, right? Not say let it costs explode, but we're at war for $1 billion a day. And I don't hear anyone in the press saying, well, how are we paying for it? There's always money for bombs. There's always money for guns. There's always money
Well,
for
war
tanks
is
and
good. The
airplanes.
problem is war is good, right? War ends up being good for the economy. No?
But it doesn't.
Is this a
No.
lie? Is this a lie that I've been
Yes.
told? I mean, I remember
Yes.
forever, right? War is good. People are going to make the bullets and people are going to make the tanks and the lasers. This isn't bringing in money. What's the point? We're
Right.
not saving our borders right now.
We don't need it to be a jobs program. If we want to build stuff, we have schools, roads, bridges, hospitals, clinics, mental health care crises, a housing crisis. We could be building right here in America. Instead, we make a policy decision, or actually the president makes a policy decision to take whatever limited resources we have and put them into planes and bombs and guns for defense contractors. It's not good for the economy, or at least it's certainly not as good for the economy as investing in communities. And that's what we need to do. We need to do nation building here at home. Invest in communities in such a way that you have construction jobs and better paid teachers. The ROI on investing in education and healthcare and housing dwarfs whatever economic benefit someone could possibly claim from a military intervention. It's not even close. And I would note that, since 1989, Democratic presidents have seen the country has seen about 51 million jobs created. 51.5, I think, is the last number I saw. 50 million of those jobs came under Democratic presidents. 1.5 million came under Republicans. If war was good for the economy, then the economy would have been doing great under George W. Bush. The economy would be doing gangbusters right now with Trump spending like a drunken sailor, not to offend sailors. The simple
Or
truth is that, no, we're drunks. The simple truth is that we don't invest enough here at home. And when you educate folks, when you get them prepared for life and life's challenges, that's when you get the return on the investment. But we don't do that. We shortchange education. We overtest. We pay giant corporations and consultants to come in and do nonsense rather than just building infrastructure. We have a housing affordability crisis because we don't build enough homes. Imagine if the president of the United States announced that we're going to build 10 million new homes across America over the next 5 years. Imagine if he said we're going to build airports and repair our, defunct bridges and all the construction jobs that come from that. But instead, they've made a choice that rounding up immigrants and, Some people who've been here for years, and throwing them out of the country violently is more important. That starting wars in the Middle East is more important. And those decisions have real ramifications here at home. We're now knocking on the door of what, 30 plus trillion dollars in debt? I mean, this is real serious stuff. I think we're coming close to what, 40? It's insane. And the debt service, the interest on the debt is now $1 trillion a year. That's unsustainable. And this is from the party that taught us about fiscal responsibility. I think that what made America so successful for so long is, one, the dollar. A lot of countries run on the dollar. They peg their currency to the dollar. Oil and gas has to be bought in petrodollars. So having basically the world economic system tied to the dollar has allowed us to thrive. And two, we were a country that was known for, at the end of the day, Winston Churchill said, Americans can always be counted on to do what's right after exhausting all alternatives. We made policy decisions based on evidence and data, not on the whims of a crazy person like other countries. You have a dictator, you have a king, they say what goes, and they end up driving their respective countries or nations or empires right into the dirt with their own hubris. What made us great for so long was that we didn't do that. We had checks and balances. We had not sycophants in Congress willing to do whatever the president said, but we actually had a Congress that would serve as a real check. And then 50 serving as laboratories of democracy, coming up with their own good ideas, their own sort of experiments to see what worked. And we've gotten away from that. And it really started with alternative facts, the idea that if you don't like what the facts are, you just make up your own and say them in all earnest. I think that a lot of damage was done during the W years with the invasion of Iraq. We were told about weapons of mass destruction and yellow cake uranium, and they'll be our troops will be greeted as liberators, and it was all bullshit. And ever since then, sort of the Republican Party has gone off the deep end with, we don't need facts anymore. And you got a president who in his first term told 30,000 documented lies, culminating what people called the big lie about the election result itself. But people forget, he told 30,000 lies, and he lies through his teeth to this day about what real unemployment is, about the success that he's had. And it's all part of, like I said at the beginning, going back to Bannon's sort of flood the zone with shit. You can lie through your teeth. You know what we didn't have growing up, Joey, me and you? We didn't have fact checkers. You know why we didn't have fact checkers? Because we didn't need them. You didn't have politicians, with the exception of Reagan basically telling you that he didn't know that he was selling arms to Iran to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. You didn't have a president coming on TV and just lying through his teeth. You could talk about Clinton and his sex stuff, but basically you've started with political, folks in power feeling like they could get away with lying. And for so long, the press had this rule: you don't call a politician a liar. Even if you know they're lying, you can't say it. It's unseemly, it's ungentlemanly, it's against our code of conduct. And so instead of just saying, when Trump came about, oh, this guy's full of shit, he's a liar, they created fact checkers. And then it became, oh, the fact checkers are biased and all that nonsense. But look,
But do you feel,
now,
hold on, so do you, is this because of technology and where we are? I mean, let's put AI aside for a minute, because truthfully, AI could be social listening to all of this and quickly come through and say, right, wrong, right, wrong, right, wrong, right, wrong. Hopefully it would be used for that. I don't think it will at this point in time. I think it's being used for a lot of wrong things. But is it because of where we are within technology, where we could say whatever we want to say? It doesn't seem to matter, because somewhere out there on the web or dark web, somebody's saying it's true. Is
yeah,
that the problem? Like it's not a
so
lie anymore. It's just like a truth in a different direction.
no, it's a lie, and facts exist and they really matter. But, as any
And to you,
propagandist
I
will tell
agree.
you,
To you and to me, I agree. But I'm just saying, to everybody else now in America, lies aren't viewed as lies anymore. This is just something that was said this way, but oh, somewhere out there somebody's agreeing. Therefore, it's got to be a truth in some weird way, and it's still a lie. But people are drinking the juice and they're saying, I don't know, if I don't believe it's a lie, it's not a lie. I don't need to
yeah,
substantiate something.
that's scary. I think my response is, propaganda has always existed. The Nazis were great at propaganda. Communist Russia was great at propaganda. There's always bullshit to be peddled from on high. That hasn't changed. The mechanism has changed. Social media has made it a lot easier for people to confirm their own biases and find like-minded, misguided people faster than ever. And that
Mhm.
presents a bigger challenge. It's like flat earther conspiracies on steroids, right? So yes, tech has made things more difficult. It's made it easier to flood the zone,
Mhm.
right, with absolute nonsense. But the truth still matters, right? Gravity exists, whether you agree with it or not. The earth is round and a sphere, whether you like it or not. And
But
just
what do you
because
do
other
from a
people agree with
politics
you,
what do you do from a politics standpoint, though? Because I think this now gets complicated. You and I could sit there and hopefully find truth in what's being said, or more importantly, in flaws, right? This is not correct, or this might be directionally correct, but these three or four things are off. We need to focus on them a little bit more. We need to unpack them. We need to understand what people mean. That's always been important. And you always had political commentary folks on the news doing that for us. You don't have that as much anymore because you have Jim on Instagram who pretends he knows about politics, whether he does or doesn't. And he sits there and he'll say, I believe this is correct and here is why. And all of a sudden, that lie is the truth, right? It's the
sure,
truth because he believes. So, what do you do then? Because this becomes something that is going to be more and more and more complicated as we move forward, I think, with AI, because all that we need to do is feed lies into a tool that's going to be spitting out data. And all of a sudden, nobody can pinpoint where that, let's say, lie came from, and then it inherently becomes a fake truth,
sure.
right?
It's so, like I said, lies are palatable because people want to be lied to. They want to be told that they've done nothing wrong, that climate change is a hoax, that guns keep us safe, that tax cuts for the rich help, that Donald Trump is an honest broker, that he's never harmed a fly, that he's totally innocent. It makes people feel better. Those folks, we're not going to convince. And just because they have their own podcasts and their own echo chamber, they're going to have it. We can't sort of defeat that. And I'm a First Amendment, supporter. So I'm not going to sit here and label everything they say as hate speech or try to shut them down. The answer to hate speech or speech you disagree with is more speech, smarter speech, more strategic speech. It's incumbent upon the rest of us to have the difficult conversations. And I think that we're getting better at it, but where the left and Democrats have failed is we ceded the field, right? We simply refused to engage. Kamala didn't go on Joe Rogan's podcast. It takes a certain type of, Democrat with fortitude to go on Fox News, stare them in the face with a smile and tell them that they're wrong and that you
Mhm.
disagree and stay on message. And what we need to keep doing is talking about how democratic policies translate into better results for people, not perfect results. We're always going to have flaws. We're always going to have room for improvement, and self-reflection is important, but we need to get to a point where we're not afraid to engage, where we understand the importance of people who don't pay attention to this stuff all the time seeing us in action. Hillary Clinton, when she was running against Donald Trump, she would always get a boost right after a debate because people would actually see her on stage. No matter all the crap that was said about her for decades and the demonization, if they saw her on stage next to him, they saw a brilliant, savvy woman who knew her shit and knew what she was talking about. And she'd get a little bump, but then it would trail off until the next debate. And I think the smart thing that Trump did the first time around is he canceled, any debate 30 days before the election, right? So it had been a month since people had actually seen Hillary. And in that time, James Comey come out and say
Mhm.
he was opening an investigation and everything else. I think what Democrats need to do more is we need to go where people are. We need to be unafraid. Just because someone has said horrible things in the past, has had Nick Fuentes on their show and bought into bullshit or platformed someone we disagree with, rather than writing them off, we need to be adults and come on and say, well, look, this is where people are at. This is where I need to show up and let you know what the truth is. And hopefully that message gets through. A lie goes halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on in the morning. There will always be a disadvantage.
This is why Democrats either didn't show up at the polls, all of the Republicans drank the juice. They went to those polls.
I think if I had to diagnose why Kamala got her ass kicked, and it was a closer election than people think. I mean, she only lost by a few million votes. And, when 150 million people are voting, it's not the blowout people really
Mhm.
ascribe to it. But the reason why she should have trounced him and didn't, and this is tough for someone like you and me to acknowledge, it was Israel. That was the big fissure in the Democratic Party. And I think about 55% of Democrats thought we were way too friendly to Netanyahu, that Biden was facilitating what many people would consider a genocide or at least war crimes and an atrocity. And so those folks were like, I'm not voting for anyone associated with that regime. And the other half who stayed home, who normally would have voted Democrat, thought just the opposite. That, Biden wasn't doing enough, that he was
Yeah.
allowing campus protesters to run roughshod, that it bordered on, being pro Hamas, which I think is a ridiculous stance to take, but a lot of people felt that way. And so you had this deep fissure on the left that carried into the election, and it still persists to this day. When people are talking about who's the next person to run, who's going to be the next Democratic nominee for president, one of the litmus tests you hear most often about is what's their stance on Gaza? What is their view? Are they going to keep funding this or not? And so I think until we reckon with that and
Yeah.
really embrace what it is, because look, you talk to people, they won't admit that that was in their top 5 sort of beefs. They'll say inflation, egg prices, but the real deep divide in the Democratic Party persists over Israel. And it's the reason why a Vance presidency is at this point something that's more likely than not. There's an anti-APAC tracker now that, records any dollar that a politician gets from APAC. And sort of there's this flattening of that issue where it's the litmus test. You are either anti-Israel and the left will support you, or you are pro-Israel. The sort of party base is going to stay home. And so that's where we're at.
Who would you like to see in the next presidential race?
There's a handful of people who I think really should be on that debate stage. Governor Newsom, California, and he's one of those folks that the left recoils at and says,
Yep.
I'm a never Newsom person. It's like, really? You're going to say that now so the couch fucker gets elected? Are you serious? Right? Like, come on. Right? You're just going to write
Yeah.
him off at the beginning. So there's, he's run the 4th largest economy on the planet, and and he's done a great job, and you're going to say, no, I'm a no. So, but I think that he deserves a spot on the stage. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, has a lot to bring to the conversation. He doesn't necessarily look the part that people want, from a president. He's got a kind of like a Chris Christie build, but he's very smart. He's kind, uh, and I think that he's got a good head on his shoulders. I would love to see AOC get in the fray. She's young, she's energetic, she's smart. A lot of times we're not willing to acknowledge the role that aesthetics and looks plays in a politician's success. I think that she's drop dead gorgeous in addition to being very smart and capable, and that appeals to people. I think that's one of the reasons why Republicans are driven so Looney Tunes over her, is because, they've been conditioned by Fox News to see that the gorgeous woman on television says the thing that they agree with. And,
Yep.
then you see her, she comes and says the thing that they don't want to admit that they agree with. And it drives them crazy. And people say, oh, Steven, that's not fair. You can't just say someone's good looking, so it gives them a boost. But it does. Look, Katie Porter, bless her heart, says a lot of the same progressive things that AOC says, but she doesn't drive Republicans through the roof. AOC does, and I'd love to see her on that stage. Whitmer would bring a lot to the conversation. I think Spamberger needs more time as governor, to see if that pans out. But we do have a good bench, and I think that we shortchange ourselves when we don't give the bench more opportunity. Biden should have announced in 22. I said I was going to be a one-term president. I'll be perfectly blunt. I think I'm the only person who could beat Trump, but it's not for an 80-year-old to decide. The American people should
100% agree.
decide. And if you had a primary, and this goes back to when I said we seed the field and we don't let people see us engage enough, primary debates are great for this. People need to see the candidates on stage hammering it out with each other, beating each other's brains out over policy and vision and what they believe America is and what it should be. Because through that process, even if your candidate loses, you tend to have more respect for the person who won in the end. You tend to see things like I remember Paul Tsongas was running against Bill Clinton, and a lot of people liked Paul Tsongas, right? As opposed to this hot shot governor from Arkansas of all places. But by the end of that primary, people actually had more respect for soon to be President Bill Clinton because they had seen him be articulate and savvy and strategic on a debate. Some people just say, oh, well, that's political theater. I say bullshit. That's politics. And if you're not going to have those events, you're going to get thrashed. And that's what happened to us. We didn't have a primary. We didn't have the process. And so people to this day are like, well, you just foisted Kamala Harris on people. And if you don't pay attention every day, like I do, it's going to seem that way. If she
Yeah.
had to go through a process and beat Newsom and Booker and others, I think there would have been a different result. I think people would have said, you know what? I've seen enough of her in tough situations that I like and respect her, as opposed to this sort of, this is a top down decision that's being made by party insiders. Democrats need to get back to the part of politics where we put on a show and engage with people. And it's not having rock stars show up and open for you with fireworks. It's having real policy discussions. We also need, this is, talking about tech. I saw an interesting clip the other day where someone was in the 80s when they were talking about Mondale and Reagan, or maybe it was Carter and Reagan, but they were lamenting, like, when Lincoln debated Douglas, it was like an hour for Lincoln, followed by an hour for Douglas, followed by 30 minutes for Lincoln, right? That was the debate.
Yeah.
They would talk for hours and they
Yep.
were lamenting, like, now people are being asked on a debate stage by CNN, correspondents. They're basically being asked, the Middle East, what's your solution in 3 minutes, right?
Right.
Now we don't even
Right.
have the attention span for that. We've gone from 90 minutes to 3 minutes to sound bites.
When we look at where technology, it's the little things, the quick little TikTok videos, the quick little Instagram videos, the shorts on YouTube now are bigger than ever. These shorts are what people identify with.
People are scrolling on Instagram, then we have to
Mhm.
have the catchy shit on Instagram.
Yeah.
Mamdani, if you like him or not, he was really great at that. It takes a lot of humor, it takes a lot of engagement, but I think that we're smart and strategic enough and funny enough still to create content that people sort of find engaging for a short period of time. We need to
I
understand.
hope so.
I think we are.
I
I
hope
think that
so.
there's
But it's also he's young, right? He's a younger guy running. And then you look at these other folks that are 70, 75 years old. Yes, they have people working with them that should be able to give you these tight clips and these little quibs that are able to come up. But there is something to be said for a younger individual in politics who understands the way social media works today and realizes that unfortunately that social media is what MTV was when you and I were younger. How much longer until you're stepping down from your role in Colorado?
January 7th is my last day of 27.
Do you have anything today that you want to say to all of your Colorado constituents that you've served proudly and loved the last number of years?
Just thank you. It has been an amazing experience, an honor, and a privilege. And a lot of people say that, and I think it sort of rings hollow, but I can tell you, I've lived it from right before COVID through the pandemic, trying to get progressive policies passed, and it's worked. We've had majorities in the House and the Senate. We've had a Democratic governor. We have not gotten all the things done that, I had on my wish list when I first started showing up to meetings with a split legislature and good bills would die in one chamber and bad bills would get killed in the other. We've actually got a lot done. I think we've passed something like 20 housing bills and 50 environmental bills and a ridiculous number of healthcare and education bills, gun violence prevention legislation. Years ago, 15 years ago in Colorado, if you tried running a gun violence prevention bill, you got kicked out of office. And now we pass dozens of these bills into law and have made real change. It's hard to communicate that to people because there's always like, well, there was another shooting, or well, I know someone who can't afford their hospital bill,
Yep.
or, pollution continues. And so the work continues. And we need to reset our framing and understand that things take time. Progress is important. Yes, things don't move nearly as quickly as they should. And it would feel good at times just to ram some policy through. But then you find out that, there's a court somewhere that guts it because you didn't do it right. America's hard. This is an experiment. If you want that American dream, the idea that if you work hard and play by the rules, you ought to be able to do better than your parents did, you gotta work hard for it. And it's really difficult, but it's worth it because I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I've sat in my office with people who have said, if it wasn't for what you guys did on healthcare, I'd be bankrupt right now. I've had kids in my office who said they saw a classmate shot and had the hard conversations. What can we do to try to make this not such a daily occurrence? And when you've done that work and you've seen it in action, you know that it makes a difference. And that's the beautiful thing. And, we are Jewish, the both of us. right? We've seen
Yeah.
what happens when you live in a land where you have no say and you're at the whim of a government that doesn't like you. And that falls on both sides, whether it's Tsarist or communist Russia or Nazi Germany. In America, we have the ability to participate. And oh, what a beautiful thing it is, participatory democracy and a constitutional republic. When you have a say and the ultimate check and balance is the voters, don't be discouraged and don't be cynical because that's what the bastards want. Corporate America doesn't want you to vote. They want you to stay home and watch television and be fed your commercials. I think that we have our work cut out for us. The technology is there, whether we like it or not, and we can use it to and wield it to our advantage. We just have to be smart about it. We have to invest in education. We have to invest in things that improve people's lives and show a tangible return on that investment. I think that Biden blew Trump out of the water because I say this all the time. Nothing reminds voters about how shitty Republicans are at governing like Republicans governing. You put them in charge for a few years and shit falls to pieces. And then the story becomes, what are Democrats doing to fix it? And the word that was not said enough during Biden's presidency is recovery. He would talk about how, well, unemployment's down. Yes, inflation is up, but it's transitory. We're trying our best. Jobs are being created. Here's how many jobs were created last in a silo with no context. That doesn't mean anything. You have to use the word, we are recovering. We're recovering from 20 million jobs lost. We're recovering from a global pandemic. We're recovering from a president who had no idea what he was doing and either had shitty ideas or was totally incompetent. Either are unacceptable. After 8 years of George W. Bush, America was ready to elect the first black president. That's how terrible a job George W. Bush did.
Yes.
Right? We were bleeding 800,000 jobs per month when Barack Obama came into office. So the first 25 years of this, 21st century are marked by two of the worst Republican presidents on the planet and two of the best Democrats. It gets me nothing, Joey, to toot the horn of the Democratic Party. No one likes praising the Democratic Party. You get 0 points for saying good things about Democrats. If you're a Republican, you shit on Democrats because they're the enemy, they're the other side. If you're a Democrat, you shit on Democrats to show average voters that you get it. And if you're a leftist, you shit on Democrats because you don't know how to do anything else. But at no point does anyone in those three buckets come up and say, hey, you know what? Democrats are actually better at governing. And before you scream at me, we're actually just better at it because we go where the data take us. We're not sitting here trying to manipulate the numbers to say that climate change is real when it's a hoax. I would love to wake up tomorrow and find the science settled that says climate change is a hoax. Wouldn't that be an amazing relief to
Yeah.
know that
It's
it's
not
not
going to
real?
happen.
It's not
Not
going
going
to
to
happen
happen.
because it's
Not
real.
going to happen. Yeah.
I would love to
No,
find out that you could cut taxes for the
this goes
rich
this
and
goes back
everything
to
would
the
be
truth.
booming.
At the beginning of this, you said, I went into law because I really wanted to help the little person and I wanted to have change, and politics made sense. I think what's sad here is that I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay because you're the type of person you want in local politics. You're the type of person that you want to help drive your thoughts and feel, because I don't want to go and be in politics. I'm glad that you are. And I think really what I should be thinking here is, no, I need to find a way to get into politics. Right? My next door neighbor needs to find a way to get into politics. The guy who cuts my lawn down the street needs to be in politics. And it isn't reserved for a certain type of individual. It's for everybody that lives in that area. They should be in their local politics if they want to see some sort of change.
That's absolutely, I appreciate what you're saying, and that's absolutely right. Get involved, and you don't have to hold elective office in order to have influence. You can either pick a party like I did and start going to those monthly meetings, and you'll see like-minded people, or you pick an issue that you care about very much, whether it's free speech or gun violence prevention, the environment, trade, whatever it is. If you care about it passionately enough, there are groups out there doing the work. Go and listen and research and figure out how to get involved and how to help. And then you start scheduling meetings with your elected officials, and you find that they're actually exceptionally accessible. Their job is to meet with you. Have a little sort of respect for the process and understanding. So many people, when they first get involved, they're like, my community was involved in a school shooting, so I'm going to start a new organization aimed at gun violence prevention. And what you actually should do is go figure out who's been doing the work and what help they need. They need resources. They need people like you who have, powerful friends and, are connected to individuals who are well resourced and financed. That's what they need. The last thing they need are saviors coming in saying, you guys don't know what you're doing. You haven't been
Sure.
doing it right. I'm just going to show up and wave my magic wand. It's far more powerful to come to a group and just listen and learn. And then you realize these people have been doing the work. Here's ways I think they can improve. I'm going to become a part of it and steer it in that direction. And so you can either go by issue, you can go by party, you could just do it independently. But yes, be involved, because when you're on the sideline, when you're not involved, when you're not engaged and you're not having those conversations, the people you disagree with are the people who you would spend a lifetime opposing are there in the room, and they're the ones having influence. I can guarantee you, Joey, that the people who want every school to have armed guards and bulletproof backpacks and for guns to be on tap, they show up in
Sure.
droves. Anytime these policies are
Sure.
debated, they care so passionately about it. If you care about gun violence prevention and that's something that matters to you, you got to work just as hard on the opposite side. And that's what's supposed to make America great, is that we're allowed to participate. America's an experiment.
My mother always telling me when I had kids, just be present, right? You don't know what's going to happen. It's probably not always going to go your way. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to get pissed a little bit and be angry because your kid is going to do something that's going to really fucking piss you off, but you're present. You're there. And politics are kind of the same thing.
I think that we have our work cut out for us. I think that the American people ultimately want elected leaders who are just going to get the job done and sort of put on the blinders to the noise. Our national press does us no favors, right? They really don't. Okay. They
It's
just
true.
don't. They're here to peddle, they're here to sell advertisements on their platforms. Press holds Democrats to a much higher standard than Republicans. Democrats now actually get raked over the coals when we're not rising to the level of Obama. When you see a new Democrat come on the scene, they'll say things like, well, he's no Obama. She's no JFK, right? These sort of like, idealized figures of
Yeah.
statesmen and
Yeah.
stateswomen. Republicans get credit for being slightly better than Hitler, right? That's the big thing about Trump. Like, oh, come on. He's not Hitler. That's ridiculous, right? So like, I feel like they're held to a very low standard. If they clear the bar of not being 20th century's worst dictator, then they get a cookie. Think back to when he was running against Biden, his fans bragging about he didn't even start any new wars. I mean, come on. Isn't that amazing? No, I mean, just amazing. The man didn't even start any new wars. Like, oh, congratulations. What do you want? A medal for that? No, he wants a FIFA Peace Prize. That's how low the bar is. Democrats do a really good job of sort of casting out their own when the scandal gets too hot. Eric Swalwell this past week, scandal broke, he's gone, right? And
Disappeared. Yep.
a blink of an eye, he's gone. He is no longer a contender. He's probably going to lose his spot in Congress. Gone. And yet, I don't think the average voter thinks of the Democratic Party as any better than Republicans, because the press is committed to saying both sides bad. And they sort of feed that view of the child in the backseat of the car while mom and dad are fighting. They don't know that mom and dad are fighting because dad secretly hit mom last night while drunk and she's still upset about it. And she's trying to figure out her life in the front seat. They just see
Yeah.
both sides aren't talking to me. Both sides aren't paying attention. Both sides aren't delivering on my needs right now. And that's all we need to do, is focus on people's needs. We need to go into communities, listen, and then tell them our vision. We support workers. We support consumers. We support women in their bodily autonomy. We believe that we are a nation of immigrants, and we understand that demonizing them doesn't work. But we also need to talk to people like they're people. I like the fact that you allow us to swear on this podcast, because
Yeah, who
people
cares?
curse. But people
Well,
curse,
this is the
right?
reality of life. People swear, people say shit, people have crappy jobs, people don't like their husband and wives sometimes, people come from beaten homes. I spoke to this girl not too long ago. She was on the podcast. Her mom was absolutely miserable, did horrible things to her. This is the reality of life. This is life. This is most people in America. Hey, your life sucks. Let's talk about what sucks. That's what we need to unpack.
We need to do a better job being authentic, admitting that, look, we're human. To err is human. We fuck up. We make mistakes. We're not refined folks anymore. If we ever were, we're a bit more vulgar than we used to be. The internet has precipitated that and accelerated that.
Yeah.
Let's just talk to people how they are and then listen, and without judging them and making them feel like shit. Uh,
Politics feels like it's always been reserved for certain folks within America. Have they been the more educated? Have they been the ones that speak a certain way, the ones that trust a certain way? Like that's when you're a kid and you look at TV, politics are not the dude down the street, right? It's not the teacher, right? It's the
it is
lawyer.
now. It wasn't. For us growing
Mhm.
up, I'd agree with you 100%. It's when you had someone like Bill Clinton claim that he never smoked pot, or if he did, he didn't inhale. Al Gore's never done anything wrong in his entire life. I was in the military, and then I was a prosecutor, and then I was a governor, and I've been a perfect person my whole life. I've never done anything wrong. That sort of ideal is gone because
God.
it's not attainable. Yes, character matters, but I think when you see a group of people who used to preach about character, especially when Bill Clinton was president, and harp on him for being a philanderer and all of that stuff. But then you find out that the whole time Newt Gingrich was going after him, he was cheating on his wife. And then you see probably the most professional example of a president in our lifetime was Barack Obama, the consummate statesman, never wrestled with the pig because you'd get muddy. When they go low, we go high. That whole ethos and mentality, and the very people who shat on Clinton for his 8 years of being president about character shat on Barack Obama
Mhm.
relentlessly. They were mean to him. They said nasty things about him. They said Michelle is a man in secret. They, compared Obama to Hitler and all these terrible things. And
I
then they
think
turn
Michelle's
around.
pretty. I'm just gonna say it.
Very.
I think she's
She's
a little bit
gorgeous.
of a smoke show. I think she's great.
She's gorgeous, and her arms are toned as all get out.
Her
But
arms
it's
look wonderful. She wouldn't go out with me ever. I'm married also, which is
yeah,
why
of
she doesn't
course.
want to go out with. That's the
That's the
yeah, she's
reason.
married. Yeah,
But when you see
yeah,
those people who preached about character turn around and support grab him by the pussy, that's their example of character. The 34-time convicted felon, the guy who was found liable for sexually abusing a woman, they don't have any moral ground to stand on anymore and lecture anyone about character. So what you get is you get the Graham Plattners now. You get the people liked Bernie because he was authentic. This is who I am, right?
he's
For,
the grandpa.
you
He's the
know,
grandpa you've always wanted, right? He's the
yeah,
guy who's probably sitting there with the little cigar or the pipe, and he's going to read you a story before you go to bed. He's like Peter Falk in Princess Bride. This is the Bernie in my mind. He would have been that
yeah.
for me.
He had
Yeah,
a magic trick. His magic trick was saying the exact same things consistently for 50 years.
I don't know if that doesn't work. I guess in politics anymore, right? I mean, that's the problem.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Donna Brazil, they were terrible to him. And I think that there's a lot of resentment still over that. I also think there's a lot of sort of false narrative about what he could have accomplished. Another thing I think listeners should take away is it's not enough to elect a president. You have to give him a legislature who he can
Mhm.
work with. If you're sitting out there and you're saying, well, the Dems don't do enough when they're in power, we need an FDR, we need a New Deal type president. Understand that FDR had over 70 senators when there were only 96 senators. But he had overwhelming majorities that let him pass the New Deal and get his most progressive measures done. And the lefties of the left still shat on him at the time because he wasn't great on civil rights. He wouldn't do enough vis-a-vis, African American rights in this country. If you want true progressive policies, you can't just give Barack Obama 60 senators for 60 days. You
Right.
need overwhelming majorities. Elect overwhelming majorities in the Senate, overwhelming majorities in the House, and a Democratic president, and then you'll see actual change. What I can tell you is we've had overwhelming majorities in the Colorado State House, and we've gotten a lot done. The amount of progress we've made, the amount of legislation that's been passed, it's jaw-dropping when you go back and look at it in just the 7 terms that I've been able to serve. What I would tell people is that democracy is up for renewal every other year. It's not 4 years, it's every other year. And you need overwhelming majorities in order to get stuff done. If you give a Democratic president a Republican Senate, don't complain when he's not able or she's not able to enact your progressive agenda.
Do you think Epstein files are going to play a big pivotal role in this next election?
I think that the Democrats need to run on accountability for Epstein and the Epstein files and anyone who was involved in that nastiness. And it is
Mhm.
disgusting. Anyone who was involved in that needs to be held accountable, and Democrats should run on that. I don't think it matters to the typical MAGA voter with respect to Trump or his popularity. Like I said, he tells them that they're not to blame, that it's not their fault. They live vicariously through him. So long as he's able to avoid accountability, they're able to avoid accountability. QAnon, which you don't hear about anymore, was so popular. At one point, it had over half of the identified Republican voters, over half of them said that QAnon has some validity to it. And the reason why so many people bought into this conspiracy theory is because it told people what they wanted to hear. You're not a bad person for supporting Donald Trump. Just the opposite. The world is run by a cabal of pedophiles, and he's the one who's actually going to expose it. And so you got to pretend that your support for Trump was on par with exposing a global pedophile ring that included Hillary Clinton running a human trafficking operation out of the basement of Comet Ping Pong, of all things. Those type of lies and conspiracy theories serve a function. They tell people what they want to hear, and people don't want to hear that they voted for Epstein's best friend. They just don't. And they will go to their graves kicking and screaming that he did nothing wrong, that he was actually the first to expose Epstein, and that it's all nonsense. Anything else is nonsense. But by the way, here are 3 Democrats or Democratic donors who are in the Epstein files, and they should all be hanged.
Yep.
It's because they're going to have to acknowledge that they voted for an evil person. I think a lot of the MAGA logic is just good people don't vote for an evil person. I'm a good person. Therefore, Trump's not evil. I mean, it's backwards and it's reverse engineered, but it's a simple
It's
message.
very simple. Very
It's
simple.
very simple, and they subscribe to it because it's a lot easier than acknowledging that you got something wrong. It's a lot easier than taking personal responsibility or accountability. And when you've been raised to worship a deity that died for your absolution, like so many of these MAGA folks have been, you pine for it. You pine for that moment in Good Will Hunting when Robin Williams is telling you it's not your fault. And that's what Trump does. It's not your fault. You are loved. These people are to blame. I'm going to punish them on your behalf. How dare they? How dare they say these nasty things about you? And by the way, when they're saying nasty things about me, they're really just saying nasty things about you. And that's what he does. They want this message. It's an opiate. It makes them feel good. They like to say the left is all about emotions. The left doesn't base things on fact. Bullshit. The left is constrained by facts, sometimes to our own deficit. I don't think so, or a disadvantage. But so much of what the MAGA movement is about feeling better. It's about their emotional state. They want to feel that America is strong and powerful and in the right and virtuous. And America is going to be all those things because we have a president who tells us that we're strong and right and virtuous. Meanwhile, me and my lefty friends, we're sitting here saying that America is founded on slavery and genocide, that you're using the wrong words, that you're perpetuating these racist systems today, and that you're to blame and you better change. And if you don't agree with me, you're a racist bigot. Well,
The narrative just doesn't sound the same.
Right. If you're a normal person trying to put food on the table, who are you going to follow? The person who tells you everything's your fucking fault?
Good things are easier to side with, even if they're not really good.
Exactly. Even when they talk about inflation now, right? They talk about prices going up because of, oil prices, gas prices are going up. The same people who decried inflation under Biden, price of eggs, the price of gas and everything, he was the worst president ever because things got so expensive. Those same people today will say, you know what? A little sacrifice. If gas is a little bit more expensive, but that's what we need to do right now in order to win this war and get the Straits of Hormuz back to where it needs to be, then I support it. Yes, they care about prices, but it's not what's dispositive. It's not what's underlying their belief system. What it is it's I want to not feel so shitty about my country and what we're doing all the time. And all the left does is make me feel like dog shit. Well, here's a guy telling me nothing's my fault. Well, I know who I'm going to go with. And that doesn't mean that Democrats need to just go in and tell people nothing's their fault. I think what we could do is we should start triangulating. Let's separate who's to blame from the problem itself. The problem is over here. Housing's unaffordable. We can argue for the next 4 hours about why housing's unaffordable, or we could talk about solutions. You want to talk about solutions? Let's not even mention who's to blame. The planet's getting hotter. Crops are fucked up. Weather events are becoming more catastrophic.
Who's to say who did it? Who's to say?
Right.
Let's
Who's
just
to
solve
say?
it. Yeah.
How about we solve it? We solve it by everyone can agree that pollution's bad. We don't want to pollute our rivers and our soil and our air, do we? We don't want kids getting sick from pollution, do we? You're not pro pollution. I'm not pro
No way.
pollution.
No way.
Let's figure out a solution. But we're so hung up on telling people who's to blame that we turn people off. Mark Maron, the comedian, he has the
Mhm.
saying, at some point, lefties, we should probably reckon with the fact that we annoy the average person into fascism.
It's true.
We have to stop being so annoying about things. Talk to people like they're people. Show some grace and humility when people mess up the words that we would use, that we wouldn't use the same language. Give a little grace. Don't ascribe malintent. People are going through stuff. Maybe there is some malintent there. Forgive it immediately and move on, because otherwise you're going to get bogged down in this sort of trap that you don't want to be in. You want to reach people. And so I think that if we can meet people where they're at, show them that we're focused on policy, deliver actual results, then a lot of this stuff just becomes noise, man. It just becomes, okay, yeah, Joe Rogan, he could sit there and talk to 100 million people and tell them nonsense. They know at the
Yep.
end of the day that it's entertainment. It's not
Yep.
actually the truth. He's allowed to ask the dumbest fucking questions anyone's ever asked. He's allowed to say things that are just totally stupid and off base. So are a lot of everyone is, you know?
Everyone is.
Charlie Kirk, I didn't agree with probably
I,
99% of things that Charlie Kirk said.
I say
He
the
had
same
the
thing.
right to go on campus and annoy people. Of course he
I said the
did.
same thing. I said the same thing.
He's the
There wasn't
most,
one thing I agreed with. Wasn't one thing I agreed with. Nobody should be killed. There was not one thing I agreed with,
no
but I
one.
did say from the beginning. I did say from the beginning. Here's what I liked about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was doing what they should have been doing on universities all along, which is everybody should be out there having this like loud debate with each other about any topic you want. That's the reason you go to college, right? That hasn't happened since like the 60s or 70s. It has when I went to school. Nobody cared about being outside talking to each other. We went to class and we went and got drunk and we went and got like tacos. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have
You
to
might have
meet
done
people where
cooler
they're
stuff
at.
because you went to Michigan. So you might have I went to
I
Michigan
did.
State.
I did. And that's obviously cooler. And I feel bad for you. But,
And I well,
you know, at the end of the day, we have to meet people where they're at. Even if you disagree with them, even if you think they're being antagonistic. Charlie Kirk was basically the most successful person shouting on a street corner with a bullhorn.
yep.
He just said, you know what? Instead of standing, I'm going to get myself a nice little chair and a table and a
At
tent
10th. Yep.
and a tent, and I'm going to sit under it and I'm going to say provocative things that you
Mhm.
disagree with and beat me in the marketplace of ideas. I have the cojones to sit here and say things knowing that you're going to disagree, knowing that I'm just going to clip it, right? And put
Mhm.
it online and make myself look smart. Even if a
Yep.
bunch of people kicked my ass today, I'm going to clip the 90 seconds that make me look brilliant and I'm going to promote the shit out of it. And instead of shooting that person, which is abhorrent and gross and disgusting, what we should have been doing, and I think people like Destiny and a few others now, you know, sort of on the left, Adam Mockler and a few others, are now going onto college campuses and trying to, you know,
They
repeat
should.
what Charlie Cook was doing. And that's exactly what we should be doing.
I know.
Go meet people where they're at. When whether it's a college campus or another populous area where people stop and listen, at least they'll see that we're not so afraid, that we lack the courage of our own convictions. I didn't come to the conclusion that climate change is real because I'm a liberal. I'm a liberal because climate change is real, and liberals are the people trying to do something about it. If all of a sudden conservatives acknowledged climate change and started fighting for it, I'd be open to listening to them
So they'll
more. And
change. Yeah.
right, I don't think it's going to happen because
No.
it makes them feel bad. I talk to a lot of conservative voters. I have conservative colleagues in the House chamber. They are ranchers and they are farmers and they love the earth. They care about water. They care about soil. They care about the air. They care about what crops they're growing and the
It's so
impact it has.
counterintuitive that they're not sitting there saying, fully agree that this is going to negatively impact me. Therefore, I should agree climate change is, in fact,
Until you
real.
realize that we do it in such a way that makes them feel shame and guilt. It goes back to
Would make
this
them feel
idea that we blame
dumb.
them.
Yeah.
Yes, that's part of it. But when you tell
Yeah.
that person who cares so much about the earth that, oh, yeah, you care so much. Well, the person you vote for just wants to drill, baby, drill and pump
Yep.
carbon and pollution into the air. And it's your fault that everything's becoming polluted. That turns them off. And it makes them say, you know what? I'd rather just say it's a liberal hoax, a conspiracy, to destroy American manufacturing, as if anyone wants that. I'd rather believe that line of nonsense than be made to feel guilty about it. If you were to talk to me about it in a way that respected my point of view, that respected and acknowledged my love for the planet, I'd probably be more receptive to what you're trying to say. But we don't. We on the left, we like to shame and guilt and belittle and berate and cajole. And that doesn't work on those folks.
Steve, I don't think you're done with it. I think you're going to jump back to it. You're extremely passionate about it. You could have talked to me about being a lawyer, and maybe we'll do that again one day, and maybe you'll be just as excited. But you're excited about this. I'm proud that you took up the reins and you did this for the last number of years. Like, I would be happy if I was in your district, and I hope a lot of the folks in your district kind of feel the exact same way. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
No, thank you so much for
Thanks.
being here. And I think we'll do this again. We'll do it with a different topic. I think you have a lot of information that's great. And I think you're coming at it from a very unique place. And I love hearing from you. So thank you.
Joey, man, it's great. Thanks so much for having me on. Thanks for letting me be a misfit among you for a couple hours. It's great
That's
what
it.
you're doing. Keep engaging with people, get the message out, because it's a beautiful thing when people get to hear real talk. So thank you.
Thank you, dude. Thank you. We'll talk again.
We'll talk soon.